Okay, let's move on to Mary, who is the lawyer on our panel. Mary, it seems that a lot of the content that Lee's going to be depending on is, well, not depending on, but there is user-generated content is part of what you're planning to offer in order to engage the audience. I know we exchanged a look during Lee's pitch regarding some of the things that she was doing. So give us some insight into some of the legal ramifications of what it is that Lee's doing.
Well, Lee, you're obviously a very experienced television producer, so you know the whole issue of clearing rights and for what formats and across platforms and for the duration that you need, et cetera. When you go into a cross-platform kind of project like this, naturally that becomes more complex. So because you'll be working with all of your creators of content that are your artists, your writers, all of your crew, all of which have to grant you the rights to what they contribute to the show, but with enough rights to take it in all of the avenues that you might contemplate and all the means of distribution that may not be in your current plan, but may actually evolve, is possibly in your mind. So you should be thinking now about, when you start building those contracts, what are the potential uses that we might go, even though it's not really necessarily in our first phase of our project. Where might this go in order to be able to avoid having to go back and get those rights later on? This is clearly, you've got an interesting layer of user-generated content. I find this kind of quite a fascinating project because you have your subjects who are not professional writers, so in a sense they are like user-generated content providers, but you will have them under contract because they're subjects in your show. So you have some control in advance. You can prepare them for what would be appropriate to be uploaded and what would not be. You just have a greater sense of control over those people, including even, is it Mikey?
Mikey,
yeah.
Yes.
Who, although not necessarily a direct subject in the sense of being one of your pilots. He is one of the pilots?
He's not a pilot, but he's definitely a main character.
Right, so again, you contractually you'd have a relationship with him in advance, even though he might be putting content on his own sort of materials or his own Facebook page or whatever. You can have an arrangement with him about the kind of content that he would put on that references your show and your website. So that's something that is controllable, and you just have to think through all the elements you'd need in order to be able to do that. The real challenge is going to be your user-generated content from your fans, from some of these stories that we've just referred to, and it's an ongoing process. What I find fascinating about this project is that you're going to have multiple modes or methods by which people can upload content, which makes it tricky for you to manage that. Were you planning to have some sort of delay before it appears?
Everything they submit goes into a bin called for admin review.
Okay.
And we'll have people that are vetting it. We also, on the site collection, the collection sites, we have waivers clearly saying, do you authorize that you have the rights to submit? And we also say, if you've created a video clip that you want to upload, please do not include music.
That's a good idea.
I work a lot with music, so I know. So do not include music. If they do, we'll strip it out because we know we can't trace it. They'll take,
Oh, it would just be so onerous.
They'll say Creedence Clearwater Revival, and they'll make a video of, but of course we can't use that. So we're making that really clear to them.
Right.
So how are you going to do that on YouTube?
Sorry?
How are you going to do that on YouTube?
Well, that they submit to YouTube, we're putting the waivers on there too. So if they're submitting to our YouTube channel, they have to sign that.
Now, normally, the reason why we're asking is because the functionality of how the upload occurs and what they have to do in order to be able to upload to your site is a really good method by which you can have an online user agreement, because you can have them actually take an active, decisive move by clicking on I agree, for example, and you have something that you can show that in fact you can't even access it unless you agree. Some of the methods that you've been talking about, like the Twitter feeds, might be trickier in terms of getting that kind of agreement that is
There'll be
expressed.
tweets pretty much from just Mikey himself because we want to exert control over it.
Okay, so you're not having tweets from other people?
We may or we may not. We haven't decided that yet. Some of them the characters are a bit renegade.
Right, okay, exactly.
So we need to really watch. And so far we trust Mikey.
Right.
And we're just, not quite sure about the other guys. Because
Right.
they don't live by our rules north of 60, okay? It's a different world.
Right.
So we're a bit wary of that right out of the gate.
Well, that's good, because obviously that's one of the reasons why they're so attractive as subjects.
Exactly.
But when you're cutting a produced
Right.
show, you can
Yes,
control that. But
exactly.
when they're live, it's a
No,
lot trickier.
so far we're thinking just Mikey because of these elements, and we may need more extensive waivers than we already have. We're just using more TV plates than that we've got in-house in our business affairs.
Yeah.
But we perhaps need more complex ones to address the issues you've brought up.
Mary, can I
Well,
ask you,
certainly, you will, and you need to figure out where you would have them in order
Yes.
to be able to prove in your due diligence that they expressly agreed to this, and therefore, you can show if there's any sort of challenge later on that they did actually agree to these terms
Exactly.
and conditions,
Yeah.
and gave these reps and warranties to you, that they had control over this, they didn't infringe anybody's rights, and had the right to be able to grant you those rights. So.
And of course, all of this is important eventually if you're going to be in the revenue generation mode. You have to ensure that these rights are clear. So that's why we're spending some time talking about this, because it's about preparing for that exploitation potential. James?
can I just ask you a question about Twitter? If Mikey was to reply to another Twitter user, and that Twitter comment is included in his reply, does that infringe on rights?
Well, it would depend on if there was some infringing content in the person that he's twittering with, and he then repeated it or uploaded it to your website, for example, or in some ways was connected to you as publisher, you would also be liable for any of that.
So we need to control his RTs, his repeat tweets, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or create a rule book that he can stick to.
Yeah.
Create a what, James?
A rule book that he can stick to.
Right.
So that he has some guidance about what he can't
Yeah,
and
this
cannot
is
do.
good
And it would
point.
have to be monitored on an ongoing
Yes.
basis too. And
Yes.
in that kind of quick time response is pretty tough. But if you prepare in advance, I think you can manage that. We've been thinking about it, obviously.
Okay, we do have to move on,
Okay.
but
I just had one more question, which is, if someone complains about infringed content and you remove it quickly enough, is it generally okay, or is...
Well, it doesn't mean that the infringement didn't happen, but you have a defense.
Okay.
And you've shown that you've done your due diligence and that you've been acting responsibly by taking it down. So that's your best defense in these circumstances.
This new world is a scary place.